My name is Cecilia Harry. I am Chief Economic Development Officer here at the Colorado Springs Chamber and EDC, and I appreciate all of you spending time with us today to learn more about a really important topic in the present and future of our community. Today's topic is U.S. Space Command, and we will be here until 12:30 p.m. today. The session is going to be interactive, and so we encourage you to ask questions. You can post your questions in the chat at any time, addressed to everyone or to Emma Mitchell, and we will make sure that those questions are looked at and asked in the order that they're received toward the end of the session. We're also recording today's presentation, and it will be available to the public to view by next week. We like to draw a winner for a special prize at events like this. So we ask that you rename yourself in the Zoom app with your name and your company name. That really helps us identify a winner when the time comes. So please take a moment to do that. And before I introduce our first speaker today, just a couple little housekeeping items from the Chamber and EDC that may be of interest to you. First is that we have formally launched a new tool targeted to help small businesses and entrepreneurs make stronger data-informed business decisions. And that tool is called Size Up. We will have a link in our chat feature. It's available on our website 24/7. And anyone interested in exploring market data for El Paso County is welcome to play around with the tool. So you might be sitting here in Colorado Springs. It might be somebody interested in moving here from one of the coasts, but it's a really fun, interactive tool that helps companies get better data in an easy, informative way so they can make stronger business decisions. And we're excited to be offering that to help our entrepreneurs and small businesses build up their resiliency as they work through this economic challenge that we have globally right now. And we also have two upcoming events. The first event on September 17th is the State of the City, and we need you to register for that for the free live stream. So please make sure you do that if you're interested. And Mayor Suthers will be speaking about the City of Colorado Springs history and recent progress and the future ahead of us as a city. And then on September 24th is another session of the Small Business Roundtable. That is our support group for small business owners and executives. And it's a chance to talk with peers and community partners in small discussion groups virtually. This month's topic is going to be focused on customers. So again, if you're interested, please check that out. There's more information on our events page. And now I'll read a word from our sponsor of this Chamber Connect, BBSI. BBSI is a local high-touch professional employer organization advocating on behalf of business owners. The Colorado Springs team of subject matter experts provides consulting services to help navigate and propel small to medium-sized businesses through challenges in the areas of workers' compensation, risk management, human resources, payroll, talent acquisition, and business consulting. And they help ensure compliance, mitigate risk, and help companies scale for growth. If you would like more information, you can reach out to Kevin.Davis at BBSI. We will put his email address in the chat feature. And Kevin's happy to visit with you with a zero pressure discussion on how they can assist you with your company needs. And now, without further ado, for today's main feature on U.S. Space Command, I'm going to hand it over to my fellow chief on the Chamber and EDC staff, Reggie Ash. Welcome, Reggie.
Good morning, everybody. I am the Chief Defense Development Officer at the Colorado Springs Chamber and EDC. As the Defense Chief, I have four main priorities. I connect our member businesses with the military installations in the area. The MAC, the Military Affairs Council, has several engagements each year with those installations. This year, of course, those are virtual engagements. I advocate for our airmen and soldiers. As many of you perhaps know, if you're wearing a uniform, if you're employed by the federal government, there are things that you cannot say publicly, and I get to say those things for our airmen and our soldiers. Third, I oversee our cybersecurity program. And then fourth, in terms of developing the defense economy, I help ensure that the military units that are here in Colorado Springs stay here, and then recruiting new units. And of course, number one of all those priorities, recruiting new units, is the permanent basing of U.S. Space Command. And in all of that work, one of my key partners is Conley at the city. So Dawn, would you please introduce yourself?
Sure, great. Thank you, Reggie. Hi, my name is Dawn Conley, and I am the Special Assistant to Mayor Suthers. And in that capacity, I wear several different hats, one of them being the military liaison to the community. I wear that hat proudly. I am a military spouse. My husband served for 25 years with the Coast Guard. In that capacity, I also head up the MSCC, which is a subcommittee of the MAC. Which is the Military Spouse Career Coalition, and I love to advocate for military spouse issues here in the community. Thank you, Reggie.
You bet, Dawn. So let's jump right in here on the U.S. Space Command. I bet most of our audience is probably very aware that there's a lot of confusion out there regarding U.S. Space Command and Space Force. A lot of people use those terms interchangeably, but they actually refer to two very different things. Let me talk about Space Force first, because I think that's the easiest to describe. Space Force is a new branch of the military. It's equivalent to Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines. Those services are all charged with recruiting, organizing, training, and equipping. So in terms of the Space Force, that means Space Force will, first of all, recruit members and train them to do their jobs. And then the Space Force is organized into new units called deltas. If you were familiar with the Air Force structure, a delta is similar to a group or a wing. Space Force did away with one of those echelons, and so group and wings are now a delta in the Space Force. And then lastly, the Space Force is responsible for purchasing equipment, the equipping role, and that would include satellite systems, radars, et cetera, that the members of the Space Force will use to accomplish their various missions. When the military forces are actually used, that happens under the authority of a combatant commander. U.S. Space Command is the 11th combatant command in the United States. I think a familiar example of a combatant commander, a familiar example to most of us, is Central Command, or CENTCOM, which oversees all the military operations in what we commonly call the Middle East. It has included the wars in Iraq over the past 30 years. And I think because of those wars, we're all very familiar with at least the term CENTCOM. And so using the Iraq wars as an example, the military services all provided trained and equipped units to CENTCOM. And then the CENTCOM commander has the authority for directing those troops' activities in the area of responsibility in Iraq, in Kuwait, in Saudi Arabia, and the surrounding countries there. For U.S. Space Command, that area of responsibility is outer space, or more specifically, 100 kilometers above the Earth and higher. It's above the average sea level, to be very specific. But so the Space Force provides trained military units to U.S. Space Command. And then General Dickinson, as the U.S. SPACECOM commander, has the authority to control and operate those units. So while the headquarters for Space Force is in the Pentagon, where all military services are headquartered, it's the headquarters for U.S. Space Command, the combatant command, which we're advocating be permanently located here in Colorado Springs. It's currently here on a provisional basis for about 6 years, while the Air Force conducts their basing process and constructs a new headquarters facility. Now, I'd like to turn it over to Dawn to talk about why Headquarters U.S. Space Command is so important to us here in Colorado Springs.
Great, thank you, Reggie. Thanks for the clarification too on Space Force versus SPACECOM. That's great. I want to thank everybody for being here today. I want to thank Reggie for the opportunity to share a little bit about why the basing decision is so important for our community. I want to talk a little bit about the history that we have with the military space. We have a long history, and military space has had a long presence in Colorado Springs. It started in 1982 as the Air Force Space Command, which has now evolved to the U.S. Space Force, which Reggie was just mentioning. And we want to extend that history by really becoming the permanent home to U.S. SPACECOM and their headquarters, and by being its first, present, and future home. The first number really is the 1400. This is a direct impact. So if Space Command is based here, there will be hiring actually 1397, but we round up to 1400 people directly. That's government and civilian workers. The next slide is a 5,000 total impact hire. So there's going to be 5,000 employees, both with that direct impact and that indirect and induced impact. So there would be an additional 5,000 people that would be impacted. But really the big number is that first number in that first column, first row, and that is the total impact to our community. And that's $1 billion a year, which is that's a big number. It's going to be a big impact to our community. So that one is really big. And just to kind of put it into perspective, our 5 local installations have an economic impact of $5.7 billion a year. So this number would be a complement to an already strong economic sector. Colorado Springs has been involved in the space frontier for years, as I mentioned, and we have in that process been creating a wonderful ecosystem of industry, technology, government, higher education, and workforce. And all of these benefits that we have been building for years would be amplified with this permanent basing decision. And there would be a large expansion in our local economy for years and decades to come. Next slide, please, Emma. I wanted to talk a little bit too, just beyond just that basing decision and some of our community impact. And really there's a huge ripple effect that would happen with the basing of US Space Command. So the jobs would follow, not only just the jobs, as we mentioned, that will be based at US Space Command, but also those indirect jobs. Just to kind of give you an idea, the average wage of those jobs in the aerospace cluster is $138,000, and that's 24% higher than the national average of the jobs. It really is something that would kind of ripple through our whole economy. It would be, an increase in a tax base. Higher wages would mean higher end homes, higher value to our homes. There's really a lot, construction, professional, scientific, technical services, education, health services, all of these clusters would really benefit from the basing decision. Really, when we look at kind of some of the ecosystem that's happening here, the industry is already responding. Industry is already growing. There's already a big change to that particular sector of the economy, and they're planning on future growth and they're investing heavily. Higher education is working to create high-tech jobs and high-tech degree programs to respond to this need. So really, the impact would be direct to the SpaceCom and to the military sector, but it would actually ripple out into all the other clusters and all the other sectors in our community. Next slide, please, Emma. This is just a quick snapshot of what the employment looks like by sector. And I really kind of wanted to just bring out a couple observations. One is the military is already a large employer. You can see that it's at 17%. And then the other observation I wanted to make on this slide was that really those top 3 sectors make up almost half of our economy. So it's a really big, almost like super sector kind of focus on those 3 different sectors. And if we add US Space Command, that would just add to that military presence here and the importance of the military here in our community. So they would definitely be a bigger contributor to our economy. Next slide, please. So I wanted to just kind of talk about 2 different things with regards to El Paso County versus the rest of the United States. Off to the left, you can see that the adult population with veteran status in El Paso County is at 15.9%. And when you compare that to the rest of the country, they're sitting at 7.1%. And the reason that that's important is because as you look to a dedicated workforce for the US Space Command, that military presence and the military workforce with the desired clearances and experience would be really huge. It would be a great opportunity for a lot of different veterans, and also it would be a great match for the US Space Command headquarters. The slide on the right, I really just kind of wanted to show and illustrate the differences. The green bars are what is the national numbers. So if you look at kind of like our top 3 sectors with regards to GMP contribution, the military is huge here in El Paso County. That's the blue graph in the back. If you look in the foreground into the green, that's 2% nationally, almost 14% here in Colorado Springs. So really just that contribution to the gross metropolitan product is really huge for the military here in our community. Next slide, please. And so just kind of to wrap up that conversation about workforce, you know, we really are a growing state with regards to our population. We're the 8th fastest state. And out of all the growth in 2010 to 2017, 95% of that growth is in the Front Range. So it's really just a good kind of indication that Colorado is growing in population. And then that graph on the bottom talks about the average age, and we are younger and more educated than a lot of the other workforces in across the country. So it's really a good comparison, and really that makes a good case for our technical and some of those higher skilled jobs that would be coming to Colorado Springs with the Space Command. So, you know, I also want to talk a little bit too that we are second only to California with the number of aerospace companies and aerospace suppliers. So we really have a huge concentration of that industry already, and it is continuing to grow. And if Space Command comes, it would just be a big amplifier with regards to that sector. So just to kind of, you know, wrap everything up, it really is in order to kind of support Space Command, supportive, resilient defense community, we have to have a lot of collaboration and leadership. And that's something that's really been important as Reggie and his team have been looking to, you know, kind of maneuver this through the process. Many people have been tireless advocates for the case to make Colorado Springs the permanent home of U.S. Space Command. It's a big job, and I wanted to thank you, everybody that's been involved with it. Thank you for your attention today. Reggie, back to you.
Thanks, Dawn. We definitely have had a lot of community support on this, a lot of great partners. Thanks for explaining why this is so important to the community. I think it's clear to see why the Chamber and EC has been proud to be one of the leaders of this effort for our city and for our community. The effort really began back in 2018, but with my predecessor, Rich Birchfield, creating the National Security Space Working Group, which included leaders from around the state who worked together on key messages and advocacy. And then through 2019, we played to the Air Force's process last year. We wrote several advocacy letters from our elected leaders. Mayor Suthers himself wrote and signed several of those letters. And we worked with our city council, our board of county commissioners, and even the legislature on proclamations supporting U.S. Space Command being based here permanently. This year, there's a new Air Force process, and we have two separate but complementary efforts on that. We have a PR and advocacy campaign that is focused in Washington, D.C., and we also have what we call our technical process, or responding to the Air Force's process, responding to their questionnaire, and just answering the mail, really is a succinct way to say it, answering the mail to the Air Force. On our PR and advocacy campaign, you know, Mayor Suthers has said multiple times, he said it on TV interviews, that if the decision is based on the merits, we win. But the risk is at the level of presidential politics. And so we've developed some good partnerships with our elected leaders locally in Denver and in Washington, and we have some good corporate partners as well. We started this advocacy campaign in February. We got off to a quick start with the Trump rally here in town. You might remember a lot of the Gazette and TV news coverage we got with our red shirts. I'm not wearing one today, but we have those red t-shirts with the hashtag USSPACECOM and the capital CO for Colorado in there. That, you know, that was how we kicked off that campaign, and we achieved some really goals with that. We got our local community informed and engaged. We got the statewide aerospace industry informed and engaged. And we got our elected leaders, from our mayor to our congressional delegation, engaged on this and using our key messages. And even Governor Polis, you might remember, if you happen to watch the rally, you might remember that at the rally, President Trump was even complimentary of Governor Polis, opposite parties, but he was still complimentary of Governor Polis showing up at Air Force One that afternoon to greet the president and to let him know why it was important to put U.S. Space Command here. So we definitely got the attention of everybody here in Colorado, and we think we got the attention of leaders in Washington, D.C. as well. We know we got the attention of the Trump campaign, and we believe that even the president himself knew how strongly we were advocating here in Colorado Springs. And then in March, Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we had to restructure our contracts with our consultants, place some of our consultants on hold. Fortunately, we were able to restart all of that in late July. And then last month, we got off to a fast restart in our political advocacy campaign. Mayor Suthers, Commissioner Waller, our CEO, Dirk Draper, our board chair, Kathy Bowe, and then me and Vicki Lee from the Colorado Space Coalition representing the state. Our consultants were able to set up a conference call with the White House. And we had 4 leaders at the White House: the political director, the deputy political director, the deputy director of intergovernmental affairs, and the director of public liaison. And we were able to talk to them for over 30 minutes and explain to them all the reasons that U.S. Space Command should stay right here in Colorado Springs. And it was great. At the end of the call, they let us know that they hear from lots of communities, and that ours was perhaps the most organized community call that they've ever taken. And so that was a great victory. And again, with lots of teammates, our elected leaders, as well as some corporate leaders as well. The next step in our campaign is a trip to DC later this month. Chair of our Board of County Commissioners, Mark Waller, will be joining me. Keith Klain will be joining me, and perhaps a couple others. And we're planning some meetings with leadership at the Pentagon, as well as with defense committees on Capitol Hill. And we're just going to continue to hit our key messages. We're going to continue to talk about all the great reasons that the U.S. Space Command shouldn't move. It needs to stay right here. It provides the best return on investment for taxpayers, for sure. Now, in terms of responding to the Air Force's process, that's something we just finished a major piece of that, and we're going to continue to do that in the future. So back on May 15th, you may be aware that in the middle of May, the Air Force made a couple of important announcements. First, May 15th is when they announced that Colorado Springs Peterson Air Force Base is the provisional location of U.S. Space Command for approximately the next 6 years. They also announced a multi-step process that they'll use to select the permanent location of U.S. Space Command. The first step was a self-nomination that our community meets the screening criteria. Mayor Suthers, the first week in June, Mayor Suthers signed that nomination letter. Soon after that, Governor Polis endorsed that letter, and we got that up to the Pentagon. That self-nomination process lasted until June 30th. And if you can believe it, there were 26 states that had communities that nominated. Now, that was all the information that the Air Force put out, was that there were 26 states. The rumor mill has it that there were over 50 communities that nominated. Here in the state of Colorado, in addition to Colorado Springs, Aurora, where they have Buckley Air Force Base, Aurora nominated as well, but 50-some communities around the country. That was the first step, the self-nomination. Step 2 runs July through October. The Air Force will use an iterative questionnaire process to seek input from the communities. Step 3 will begin in November, we assume right after the election, because that's when the Air Force is going to do the down select. They're going to announce the finalists. And then in November and December, they're going to conduct site visits. In January of 2021 is when the Air Force will announce the winning location, that Colorado Springs is the winning location for the permanent basing of U.S. Space Command. So for responding to the Air Force's questionnaire process, we knew we needed the community's help, and we'll continue to need the community's help. About 5 days after the Air Force released their guidance, we held a community-wide Zoom with about 70 people, and that included Senator Bennett, Senator Gardner, and Congressman Lamborn, Mayor Suthers, and Commissioner Waller, all addressed the community for us and gave us a great pep talk, and they all have just been fantastic partners, fantastic supporters. Our congressional delegation has done a great job talking to the president at every opportunity about this. One of the things we also did in that large community Zoom was to ask the community for input on our community strengths relative to the Air Force evaluation criteria. So if you have any familiarity with the military, you're familiar with Sun Tzu. And one of the things that Sun Tzu said was, know thyself and know thy enemy, and you'll win 1,000 battles. And so for the rest of May and through June and the first 3 weeks of July, we spent a lot of time learning about ourselves and learning about our competition. And when I said we asked the community for input, we got nearly 40 pages of input from the community, helping us to capture our strengths in the 4 main criteria that the Air Force is using. Those 4 main criteria are mission-related, infrastructure capacity, community support, and cost to the Air Force. And by the way, we think we're going to score very highly in all of those, especially the mission-related and infrastructure capacity, which are the ones with the most points. Now, we had a working group of community leaders with a wide breadth of experience, all leaders in the Military Affairs Council, helping us to consolidate those inputs and do some research. We also had an Oversight Committee, a group of senior executives, military, corporate, public service experience. Let me just read off their names to you because it's really a great list. Retired General Lorenz, Retired General Shelton, Retired General Chilton, Retired General Renuart, Kathy Bowe, Don Addy, Andrea Barker, Tim Seibert, and Dirk Draper all worked very closely with us and provided some great strategic guidance to us. The working group and the Oversight Committee conducted a lot of research, including through that community outreach that I mentioned, and we collaborated closely with our Air Force bases. Also did a lot of individual outreach to people like retired Lieutenant General Buck, former Assistant Secretary of the Air Force Sue Payton, were all critical advisors to our team. Also within the Chamber and EDC, our Economic Development team assisted providing research on local workforce, as well as narrative on recent business expansion in the defense and aerospace industry in this area. We then turned our research and some initial words over to Dawn and the city leadership to write that final product that then on the last Friday of August, we were able to submit back to the Air Force, back to the Air Staff at the Pentagon. And now we're kind of in a waiting game with them. They could come back to us with more questions, and Dawn and I and the others will continue to partner and be ready to answer any follow-up questions they have for us. And then, as I said, when they do that down select, they're going to give us the details of how they're going to do those community visits. They've not committed to this yet, but we're hopeful that they'll give our community an opportunity to address them. And so we're going to do some preliminary work to make sure that we're as ready as we can be for that community input as well. One thing I want to mention is that community support category in the evaluation criteria. Some of those points come from scoring the state of Colorado on military spouse licensure reciprocity. We learned early this summer that we scored, we scored lower than some of our competition. And I have to give Don Conley tremendous credit for jumping way out on that, being a big community leader. And I was able to connect Don with our VP of Government Affairs, Rachel Beck, and we got our lobbying team involved. Some of our local legislators, specifically Terry Carver, did fantastic work and identified what was initially a workforce bill. And in that extended session that the legislature had in June, we were able to amend that, get some additional words into that, very specifically addressing military spouse licensure reciprocity. And what that's about is, for everything from real estate licenses to practicing law to practicing medicine, doctors or nurses or various aspects of the medical career field, even down into the martial arts, like mixed martial arts requires a professional certification in the state of Colorado. And now it received unanimous passage through the legislature. The governor quickly signed it, had a signing ceremony that Don and I were privileged to get to go to up in Denver in the Capitol, and all wearing masks and socially distanced, of course. but we were proud to be at a ceremony up there where Governor Polis signed it. And now nobody beats us in that category. And so that was a great victory for the community, great victory for the state, because now those military spouses can very quickly, they get a 3-year temporary license when they PCS into Colorado Springs, into the state of Colorado. And so, that effort, while it was directly answering the Air Force process, also overlaps well with our PR and advocacy campaign. And so that's something that we talk about on our social media, and that's something that we'll certainly talk about in our trip to Washington, D.C. later this month. So, in closing, let me just say that the Chamber and EDC is very proud to lead this effort for the community, using the dual track of providing strong inputs to the Air Force, maximizing our PR campaign to minimize the political risk. And with the community's help, I'm confident we will win that big prize, and the Air Force will announce in January that Colorado Springs is the permanent home of U.S. Space Command. Now, I think Don and I both have time for some Q&A, and Emma's going to facilitate that for us. So Emma, I'll turn it over to you now.
Thanks, Reggie and Don. Before we begin with Q&A, I wanted to announce the winner of the raffle. It's Charissa Woodward from Grace to Organize. If you can private message me your mailing address so I can send you some gift cards, that would be great. Thank you. So we did get a few questions, and we have some time, so I think there's a little bit of time for people to submit extra questions if they wanted to. So the first question is, Reggie, how do we get a t-shirt for the SpaceCom, those red t-shirts?
You can contact any of us here, info at USSPACECOM, info at CSC EDC is a great way to do it. Let us know if you want a small, medium, or large. I think we've got all those sizes left, and send us an email, and we'll arrange a time for you to come by and pick one up. And then, by the way, we're getting ready to start. I think in the next few weeks, we're going to start as part of our social media campaign is to take a selfie. My background is blurring out my phone, but take a selfie with your wearing your t-shirt and put that on social media and use our hashtag. And even tag President Trump if you want to. Make sure he knows how much Colorado Springs is in this.
Okay, great. Next question. I read a column in the Gazette advocating that the city acquires some additional property on the east side of Peterson Air Force Base to sweeten the deal for the government. Has there been any planning for that type of local engagement?
Donna, I can let you take it, or I can handle this one. Donna, if you want to add anything onto this, that's fine. There's been some discussion about that. There's no firm plans. There's some property on the north side as well that has been made available to the Space Force and to the Air Force.
Yep, good summary. Yep, a lot of things in discussion. Nothing that we can divulge.
Okay. Next one. Kudos for allowing easier interstate license approval, benefiting military spouses and family members getting a job here. Are there any further plans like that one?
I think that State Representative Carver is always interested in different issues, especially surrounding the military community, and that could be education, it could be military spouse issues. I know that there are some things in the work with regards to education issues with Rep. Carver. So there's always, she's always looking for ideas too. If there's something that is a pressing issue, I would suggest, contacting your state representative. They really are a great advocate for our community, for the military community.
Okay. Next question. What is the chamber doing to combat the argument that there are too many assets in one place? Oh gosh, I don't want to say all these acronyms, which could be a security risk.
So, the first thing that I talk about when I get asked that question is that, one of the reasons NORAD and NORTHCOM are here in Colorado Springs is because we're in the geographic center of the United States. And the most serious threat is from missiles coming from outside our borders. And so you want the longest lead time for that. And so the longest lead time is right here in Colorado Springs. And then you throw in Cheyenne Mountain here already. And then, because we've got all those assets that are here already, we've got a redundant and survivable. And when I say survivable, I mean, can survive a nuclear attack, a hemp attack, a high altitude electromagnetic pulse. We've already got a redundant comm system and so much other infrastructure that's here already. And so, all those arguments just kind of to build on top of themselves as we try to advocate, because all that gets right back to this provides the best return on investment for taxpayers.
Okay, thank you. Have we considered force protection? In other words, putting USSPACECOM on a military base is easier to protect forces than a new building off base. Many of the communities competing, I assume, do not have a base that can house the new command.
Yeah, that's a great point. There are a lot of those 50 some communities. That's exactly what they're doing. They're proposing, we assume anyway, because some of them have very small installations or Guard or Reserve installations in their community. And so we believe that their proposal is to put it, at maybe their Plaza the Rockies or something like that. And then the questioner is exactly right. And that then they've got force protection, anti-terrorism concerns. And if you put it at Peterson or Schriever, that's all built in. Those installations already, especially Peterson, already has two, they have two combatant commands there right now because they've got NORAD NORTHCOM and they've got US Space Command there right now. And so they've got all the ATFP protection built in already.
Okay. When will the final decision be made? Will it be after the election?
So in the Air Force process, that final decision will be in January. And then really to play it out further from there, I think I saw a question, so maybe I'll get ahead a little bit. I think I saw a question on where does the process go after January. And they're going to conduct that winning location, they'll conduct an environmental assessment, the NEPA assessment on that. Last year in the process, they conducted some of those environmental assessments on Peterson and Schriever Air Force Base. And so that process is going to go very smoothly and quickly for us after they announce that we're the winners. And they have MILCON, military construction will go in the budget. There'll be a request from the Department of the Air Force to the Congress for MILCON, somewhere between $500 million and $1 billion for that MILCON project. And then, that's the 6-year timeline, is that they'll have to do that environmental assessment and then request the MILCON, and then of course, fabricate the building, construct the facility, and that's what gets them out about 6 years.
Okay, there is a question that I'm trying to summarize here for you. Have you looked at how many USSF personnel will move to the Pentagon is part of the first question. And then there's just some questions about where are you considering putting the location of this, and just looking at different locations around the area. And Reggie, I don't know if you guys kind of answered that already, but you could speak a little bit to that.
So I'm going to look at Dawn. Dawn, I think we're not allowed to. I think both the city's attorneys and the Air Force itself has said do not release the specific details of the response to their questionnaire. So I'm not sure we can answer the second part of that question. In terms of looking at the Space Force and how many of those positions are moving to the Pentagon, absolutely, we're looking at that. We're engaged with the Space Force. Of course, we want them to keep as many of those people here, and they are keeping a lot of them here. I think the number is 800 that they plan to have on the Space Force staff at the Pentagon, and that'll still leave a large footprint back here. We're also working with the Space Force and advocating for them to bring 2 of their field commands. If you're an Air Force person, you'd call it a MAJCOM, a major command. The Space Force is calling it a field command. And right now there are, my words, not the Space Force's, my words, there are 2 of those field commands that are based here in Colorado Springs already, and we're going to try to make sure they stay here.
Okay, thank you. And there's still a little bit of time for questions. We just have one more that we're going to ask. So if anybody has any more, put them in the chat, please. Are there any criteria that other candidates might have as an advantage over Colorado Springs?
Gosh, that's a great question. Dawn, I'll let you jump in if you got anything.
Yeah, sure. I think so. You know, when we look at criteria, there's a lot of different things that other communities might have with regards to, you know, family readiness. We're strong, but other communities might be stronger in education. For example, there's some components there where there might be reflecting a little bit differently on the analysis than what we are. You know, there's a lot of different things that kind of went into that, the questionnaire with regards to, like Reggie said, force protection, airports, really just some ability to kind of have that mission and host it, you know, in their community. So there's a lot of different factors that might go into it. Obviously, some communities are going to show differently in others, you know, because we are already the home. We have so many things that are already built in. We have such a synergy going on with our industry and with our partners and with Skiff Space here that, you know, industry is really responding and investing heavily in our community. So, you know, we have some things that other communities don't have too. But with regards to some of the criteria, yes, there might be some things that they show differently than we do, but we definitely have a very strong case. And like Reggie said, the mayor always says, based on merits, we should be the permanent home for U.S. Space Command. Reggie, did I miss anything? Is there anything that you could add to that?
No, I think you covered that very well. I think, you know, really, I think we're very strong in all the categories. And I agree with the mayor that the risk is politics.
Okay. What can we as a company do to help the effort?
So, you know, one of the things that I encourage everybody to do is to watch our social media. We have a digital ambassador program at the Chamber and EDC. Watch our social media, and especially the things using hashtag USSPACECOM, like those, share those on the various social media platforms, and just, you know, help continue to tell the good story. If you're talking to folks, you watch our blog. We have a blog. We're putting an article out a couple of times a month on our blog. We have a great marketing team at the Chamber and EDC, and you know, just continue to share those. Help us tell that story through social media, because that social media is very important to those folks back in DC.
I think, yeah, definitely to echo what Reggie said, you know, the city is also putting out a lot of communications too, but as those site visits come a little bit closer, I think there's going to be some opportunities to really kind of have the community component as it gets closer to time.
Dawn, you froze for a second. Can you say that last sentence again, please?
Oh, sure. I'm not sure where I left off, but you know, just to kind of echo what Reggie said is that, you know, as we get closer to the site visits and as people could really kind of jump on board with that digital kind of amplification of the messages, the city will also have some communications that will be going out. And I think it's important for everybody to kind of really help with those messages and become those digital ambassadors and really present those messages so that they're out there and very clear for the Air Force.